Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This webinar is sponsored by both ACTE and NCLA and is geared towards administrators, superintendents, CTE directors, folks who are in leadership roles within the CTE community. And we invite you to share who you are and where you're from. I will be monitoring for questions that we can ask our panelists. But before we get started with our questions, I want to introduce our panelists for today. We have Dr. Patrick Biggerstaff, who is the Director of Career and Technical and Adult Education, and he's also the ACTE VP of the Admin Division. We have Dr. Jerry Brockway, who is the Superintendent of the Ashtabula County Technical and Career Center and past president of the NCLA board. And we have Dwight Hughes, who is the superintendent of High Plains Technology Center, and he's also on the NCLA board. Alisha Hyslop is the director of public policy at ACTE. Brady McCullough is the superintendent and CEO at Autry Tech, and he is also a member of the NCLA board. And then we have Will Morris, who is the founder and CEO of EdConnective. So welcome to our panelists and also to our guests who are joining us today. For the panelists who are serving in school districts or CTE centers, we would love to hear from you on how you're currently responding to the pandemic that's happening. And also, if you're in a remote learning scenario, what criteria will you use to determine when it's appropriate to resume in-person instruction? And for this question.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for setting this up and having us. Hope everybody can hear me okay. For those across the world, I guess, that we're broadcasting to, Woodward, Oklahoma and High Plains Technology Center is located in northwest Oklahoma. And so population, we're small. We huge on ag and energy. We probably have as many livestock animals as we do people. So that drives our economy, the ag and the energy sector. So we're heavily involved with our businesses and try to follow suit with what they're needing us to do on our end as far as the training. We serve about 300 full-time students a year, but we serve about 10,000 students when you pull in all of our business and industry, safety training, things like that. So we have a lot of industry that relies on what we do. And so we take our cues a lot from what our industry is happening in the area. Some of the things that we're doing, and we may be looking at this a little different, we're not looking to see what we can do away from campus, but what we can do on campus and follow the guidelines. So we're looking at, staggering like our break areas. We're looking at installing new doors coming in where nobody touches anything. They're automatic doors. We're looking at putting barriers up in our classrooms, because if our philosophy is hands-on training, it's hard to do hands-on training if you can't get your hands on something. So we're kind of looking at a different approach and trying to follow guidelines, but still bringing people to campus, but keeping that social distancing guidelines in place, and trying to move forward this fall. We actually had staff come back in May. We were one county that didn't have a lot of cases. And so we've monitored that and followed kind of our governors and the CDC guidelines. We've had staff on campus, but we're not open to the public until June. And then we're going to start gradually opening to the public where public can come in. We did have a few classes that needed to finish up based on that business and industry piece. And we've scanned students in and monitored and documented temperatures as they come in the building. And then monitored, even they filled out a questionnaire to let us know maybe where they've been, and we've kind of monitored who we let on campus to kind of try to keep exposure of the virus. So I hope that answered kind of what you were wanting to start with, Rachel.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to throw in a follow-up question on that. Are you experiencing any resistance towards the measures that you're putting in place?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet, but we set up a counselor hotline if somebody, students, staff, people in the community, if somebody had a question or had a concern, we had someone there that they could call, talk through it. Like I said, we've kind of gradually brought it in. We didn't come back full days. We came back partial days, and we're kind of working into full days. But so far we haven't had. And we're a big facility without a lot of staff, so we've been able to social distance even when we're here. So we've tried to do that along the way.
Okay, excellent. And then Patrick, what's happening in Indiana?
Thank you, Rachel. My internet connection's jumping in and out, so I hope that you can hear me okay. Our population is about 10-to-1 secondary students versus adult ed. We take a lot of guidance, obviously, from our governor and CDC, as Dwight had mentioned, but we're also working a lot with our Commission for Higher Ed and our governor's workforce cabinet to determine when it might be appropriate to re-engage. We're a little behind Oklahoma in that all of our facilities are closed through June. All of our offices are closed through June as well, officially. So we're really looking at a very short window of the first 3 weeks of July before many of our school districts open again. So we're trying to, again, work with other parties to determine if we might be able to get folks back on campus to do some remediation and to do some certification testing before the next school year begins.
Okay, and it looks like we had a couple of questions on monitoring temperatures for large numbers, and then also on the limits of the number of students. I believe those were for Dwight, since that is something that Dwight had mentioned. And Dwight, right now you're limiting the numbers. Is there any type of plans that you have in place as far as once you bring larger numbers back, or on how you decide what the limit is on the numbers?
I think to follow those guidelines, I think that's something that we're looking into is numbers. Probably what will change is the number we have per class, and then try to monitor that. What we're looking at is where each teacher will have the ability to monitor students as they come into their classroom so that we don't spread them throughout the building. And if they feel like they are not meeting the standard, then they have the ability to send those students home. So that's one of the things that we've talked about. We still have, at this point, we're not letting large numbers back. So the few classes we have are business and industry type safety classes that we've kept those numbers down to about 5 or 6 per class plus an instructor. So we're keeping the numbers of students down. So we haven't had a large number that we're having to scan yet.
Okay, and if the other board members want to chime in, my dogs are going a little nuts, so I want to stay muted, but if the other board members want to follow suit and chime in, thank you.
Rachel, Brady, McCullough, we're really starting to bring people back on campus now. We have been allowing some of our students that have just completed in the spring our full-time programs back in for some preparation for certification testing. So we're reviewing those skills with those students across campus now. We have also started back with some of our business and industry training. That training being limited to 9 students plus an instructor. However, we will be working with some groups a little bit larger than that in the near future, provided we have rooms that will allow for proper social distancing. At this point in time, we only train in particular rooms on campus. So we have an opportunity to do some of that deeper cleaning at the end of each and every training day that we have here. So we're trying to get back in the swing of things. The state of Oklahoma at this point in time will not allow high school students back on our campus. They will allow students to come back on beginning June 1. So we would expect to do some of that review type work with some of those high school students, as well as the adults that we've been working with.
So, Rachael, this is Jerry from ATEC, or Ashtabula County Technical and Career Center. We're located in the northeast part of Ohio. Our county is about 90,000 population. We're mostly agriculture, manufacturing, and plastics. So in the state of Ohio, like Oklahoma, our governor has limited the secondary students, are closed all our K-12 buildings until the end of the school year. What we've done is, like many of the states, have gone to online classes through Google Classroom, and our teachers and staff have done very well with that. In checking with the classroom teachers, we have large, good population or good participation by our high school students in the Google Classroom. We're just finishing up today and tomorrow with online classes for our secondary students. Our adult students came back 2 weeks ago. We have started all our adult programs 2 weeks ago with in-person and some distance learning. We're under, obviously the K-12 is under the Ohio Department of Education, and our adult classes are under the Department of Higher Education, Department of Higher Ed. Like, I don't know, like other states, but we have to submit our plans for restart to the Department of Health. Each one of our counties have to report to the respective Department of Health. So we submitted our plan to the Department of Health for restarting our adult programs, and it was approved. We are limiting our adult classes to 1 to 10. We are taking temperatures of all our students that come in by the teachers. We're sanitizing all the classrooms and labs after and before. We're also sanitizing the equipment that is used by each student after each student uses it in order to be in line with the protocols. We are bringing high school classes back June 1st, and we're going to have in-person summer school, which has been approved by our health department. Again, a 1 to 10 ratio. Again, with sanitizing and taking after each class change. We're not, with summer schools, it's a block schedule. So we normally sanitize before and after. Breaks for high school students will be limited. Individuals can only leave the classroom one at a time. We will only be offering summer school for those students who have need remediation. So that's what we're doing as far as right now, as far as what our classes and what we're doing with our secondary and adult students. Okay.
All right, and for our panelists who are in school districts and in leadership roles, what measures will be put in place to ensure the well-being of students, families, and staff moving forward? And some of you have already mentioned taking temperatures or whatnot, but we've had some follow-up questions with that, as far as even if you have a preschool program that works with high school students, what is that going to look like? Are you looking at a blend of virtual and in-person? But what are some thoughts on moving forward? And let's start with Patrick on this one.
Thank you, Rachael. I think for us, as Dwight had indicated, obviously the ideal is to get everyone back in person 100% of the time. There are many, many aspects of career and technical education that we just cannot replicate with the same level of fidelity in a virtual environment as much as we would like to. I think we're having the same conversations everyone else is. Are we going to work on social distancing, taking temperatures? Are we going to have everyone wear a mask? So we're asking questions. Who's going to pay for this? What are the logistics going to look like? Is this feasible on a campus with 8,000 kids running around? It becomes very, very challenging. I saw a social media meme going around about all the meetings that are happening online, and everybody is saying delay, delay, delay. With the absence of information, you now need to make all the decisions. That's a frustrating situation, but that's where we feel like we are. We're taking little bits of indicators from our government, CDC and others, suggesting what things might look like, but we don't really have enough information to come up with a solid game plan yet. Many of us on the phone right now serve several school districts. I myself serve 11 school districts. So if those 11 school districts all come up with different plans, what's transportation to a career center going to look like? What's admission going to look like? Are we going to be able to rotate students in small groups of 6 or 8 or 10? And we just don't know. And that's why I feel like we're still in the information collecting phase, and why it's so useful for us to have conversations like this, so we can get best practices from across the state and learn from those who are a little ahead of us.
And thank you for that. It's such a good point that there are so many questions right now. And I think that it's comforting to see that it's not just one person experiencing this. This is affecting everyone, and that we have the same questions and we can share those best practices and what's working and what's not working as well. Let's see, let's go to Brady. Brady, what are your thoughts on this?
Some of the things that we're currently doing, we are taking temperatures at the door. Our staff is wearing PPE. We're in the process of trying to order PPE where we would have a month's supply to get us by, should we get in a bind beginning in the fall. Our campus is a little different than most of the campuses in Oklahoma. We serve about 700 in full-time programs, but our total enrollment is approximately 30,000. So we serve a lot of clientele in business and industry, about 500 companies a year. So we are having to look outside the school itself to see how we can address those populations and meet the needs of the employers in this district. We're doing some things to try to get equipment in companies so that we can set up classrooms and be able to have classes originate from here on our main campus. Rachel, it was interesting question you asked of early on in the session, is there resistance to the PPE, and how is, I took that as how our company's reacting to it. We're running into both sides of that. We have companies that will gladly accept the fact that students are going to have to wear PPE if one of Autry's instructors is present within their facilities, but we have others that are hesitant to do that. In those instances, we will not put our employee into a situation where we do not feel that they're in a safe environment. So in those particular instances, if the company will not require the PPE for their employee, we're asking that that training be done on our campus, or we will set up the labs where we can broadcast into their facility, taking some older monitors and larger screens off the walls throughout the building I'm setting in, and putting new ones in here, moving some of the older equipment out to meet the needs in companies. We have also greatly enhanced the number of online programs, training programs that we have. Dwight mentioned a lot of training in safety. We do that as well. We've increased the number of virtual safety classes by about 600 since this event started. And we've found that the companies in this area are reacting quite well to that. In fact, we're able to put together some year-long safety training plans using only the online programs that we have. In addition to that, we're developing a lot of our own curriculum. We have an innovation team in place here at Autry that that's their job, is to go out and find new things to bring in and to develop the ways that we can use it. So they're working with all of our adjunct faculty that teaches in companies across the district, as well as our full-time staff in trying to develop curriculum for each of the individual programs, so that hopefully when we get to the fall, we'll be able to roll out much more curriculum than what we were available to do this spring.
Okay, and Brady, we're seeing some questions coming in that are some really great questions, such as who is responsible for taking temperatures? Would it be a nurse versus a teacher? Questions on what does that look like if you have to send a student home? And I think some of these may have been for other panelists as well. Questions on in classes where safety glasses are required, what are we going to do about masks? I have yet to find a mask that won't cause glasses to fog, and if the glass fogs, then the student is no longer safe. What are some thoughts on these questions as far as the logistics for ensuring that everyone is safe?
A lot of good questions there. I would say that if you'll come to Autry's campus on Friday morning, I'll be taking your temperature. We have teams of our management team that's at the doors. We have several of the thermometers, the no-touch thermometers, and if temperature is above 101.4, then you're not going to get into the building. So we are testing before those individuals are allowed to enter into the building. Granted, our public school system, K-12s, most of them ended on the 15th of May, so we don't have that big numbers of high school students coming to us all at once at this point in time. We have looked into the future at the possibility of hiring those services out. We have a company here locally that hires a lot of CNAs from us, and we might be working with him so that we're working with a third party in the future that would be doing that. So that's how we're handling the temperature component of that.
Thank you.
So Rachel, what we're doing is we're having a school nurse right now taking all the temperatures. We have a couple school nurses, and then when we also have secretaries, and we've ordered like 200 no-touch temperature thermometers or whatever they call. And then we're also ordering an infrared device that will take 20 scans at once. So we were going to use a combination, but when we start school in the fall, we'll probably having the teachers taking the temperatures, but also using the infrared scanner for students. We don't want them obviously to congregate, but it also is as they come into or go down the sidewalks off the buses, we're going to be scanning them that way also. So they still stay within 6 feet of each other, hopefully, which is going to be a problem for kids that are 14, 15, and 16-year-olds to stay away from each other. To answer your one question, as far as what do we do with students who refuse, we have had some students currently in our LPN and RN programs and in some of the night classes that will not come in. So we're doing what we're going to be doing in the fall, blended learning, which we are now setting up in our LPN and RN programs, where the teacher will be doing live streaming of the lectures or live streaming of the classroom instruction with a combination of Google Classroom with that. And then so that those who do not want to come in or have individuals at home who have compromising health issues and don't want to come in, that's how we're serving those students right now.
And one of the questions that came through was, where does the funding come from for the PPE and the additional resources that folks are having to purchase right now to keep students safe?
No, ours comes from the general fund.
Same here on ours.
Go ahead, Dwight.
I was just going to say we're similar to what Jerry was talking about for scanning and temperatures with teachers, and then the funding for this. We donated, like Brady and several of the others in Oklahoma Tech Centers, we donated most everything we had early on to our hospitals and nursing homes. And so we're just reordering through the general fund to cover those. So replacing what we had.
Yeah, we did a similar thing. We donated a lot of our masks and gloves and all their PPE equipment to the hospitals and nursing homes. So we got to replenish. We bought already 4,000 masks, and we'll probably be buying another 4,000 or many masks, because we figured we're gonna have to give each student a mask as they come in, and it'll be disposable, not the washable kind, because we're not sure that they'll come back in any type of shape. So we're gonna find disposable masks. But somebody asked a question about shields. We are using shields in our some of our adult classes. We're using shields and masks, and the shields are very, very effective. Although they're a little more pricey than the 80-cent mask. But shields, we are using shields, and they do work. They're very good.
And Sally Ann Roth brought up a really good point that the COVID carriers can be asymptomatic, therefore symptoms won't register on a thermometer. And I think that's an important thing to mention. My husband is a physician, and he had a patient come in last week who did not have a temperature, but then started talking about the fact that she'd been around her sister who tested positive and symptoms she had previously, and she was tested and did come back positive. So I think that it's important to follow all of the additional guidelines for social distancing and whatnot as well. So thank you for bringing that up, Sally Ann. And let's see, the next question.
Rachael,
yes.
This is Alisha. I just wanted to jump in and mention what a couple of people flagged in the chat, that CARES Act funding can be used to help purchase some of the equipment you might need to help protect staff and students in the fall. For higher education institutions, there's actually several allocations that have come out, and then on the K-12 side, through your school district is how the funds should flow. And purchasing things like thermometers and protective equipment in various forms should be pretty high on the list of districts as they use those dollars.
Oh, thank you so much for that. That's good to know. And Will Morris with EdConnective, are you on the call?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Will. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, Will, I saw, I was on a webinar that you were a panelist for recently, and one of the things that you mentioned was the difference between coaching in an in-person scenario versus remotely. Can you share a bit more about the differences and the considerations that folks need to think about with COVID?
Yeah. At EdConnective, quick background is that we're currently helping schools and districts get better at distance learning. We've been supporting educators for over 5 years virtually. And so what we're seeing now is that there's been a big struggle with just the quality of distance learning and the quality of the blended learning that is occurring. Most teachers are not trained classically on how to provide an excellent online lesson. And we're seeing a lot of barriers because of that. We know that virtual teaching through an equity lens is incredibly important, but that does require training. We also know that when you have existing professional development and existing instructional coaches, coaching in a virtual environment is very different also. And so equipping staff on the professional development end and equipping just the actual educators themselves with the appropriate training to do this work well, do distance learning well, is a huge determinant of success or failure that we're seeing for many schools and districts as they prepare for those distance learning contingencies for the fall. It's not like we can just give everyone a device and the instruction is going to follow. Really, the software, that high quality virtual teaching, is a big gap area that we're seeing that people are trying to plan for in the fall.
And thank you for that. And if you don't mind sharing your just a link to your website, because I think that that's something that I hear very frequently that folks are trying to wrap their head around, is that we have teachers who this is their first time trying to teach in a remote environment. So not only are you trying to provide instruction for students, but you're also trying to now learn how to use different platforms and how to coach and do all these pieces remotely that can really be a struggle.
Rachael, can I jump in? My name's Dexter Knight. I'm principal of a locally operated career and technology center in Nicholsville, Kentucky. And I think a lot of questions I see in the chat thread are, how are we going to teach labs? How are folks across the country going to teach labs that are obviously so difficult to social distance while you're teaching a student to weld, for example. So I just kind of want to hear what the group's ideas are. That's the big question that our 40 teachers at our center want to know.
And thank you for that. And that is a huge question. And I'll invite the panelists to just jump in and respond to that.
Well, how we're going to teach labs, our OTech, we've already come up with diagrams as far as how we're going to keep them as far as each bay and go from that standpoint. We'll probably go to a block schedule of a 2, 2, and 1, where we'll have half our students in on alternating days. We're going to have to keep our labs down within 10 according to our guidelines right now, which they'll probably be loosened up by the fall. Our electricity class, we're doing the same thing with the lab. So we're building stations that will be 6 feet apart. Our welding labs, as far as we're concerned, as far as they are self-contained booths right now, as far as for the lectures concerned, our classrooms are geared for 25 to 30. So we're redoing our classrooms again to make sure they're 6 feet apart. And we figure we get to 17 to 18 kids in there at once. So we're looking at modifying our facilities to accommodate that, and our labs as such will rotating the students every other day. I feel, and we feel in our school, that obviously we have kinesthetic learners, so we're going to maximize our lab time and minimize our academic time. We're a full service center. In other words, we have academics and high school students all day, but we'll move our academics to more of an online and keep our labs as more as possible with block scheduling. That's how we're going to do it.
Your 221 is going to be an A day, B day, Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then Friday's virtual.
Well, we're looking at Mondays, 2, 2, and 1, with Friday being virtual, and then most of our academic being virtual. Our English, maths, algebra, physics, trigonometry, and so forth being virtual most of the time. But like I said, our labs, I want to be block scheduled, so I get 2 to 3 hours a day or more. Is because of the funding in Ohio, it's an FTE seat-based. I want to try and maximize my seat, but also to make sure our students are kept interested in our school, because that's what they come here. That's what they're coming to us to do, is hands-on.
Kentucky, locally operated and state-operated centers, I can speak for the local. They're seat-based too for funding number of students and seats. So thank you for that.
That's how we're going to do it, or look at doing it.
And thank you for that. And I do see in the chat that someone asked if you could type in the 221 details. So if you don't mind responding to that in the chat. Patrick, how about you? What are you doing with the whole remote learning piece versus lab time, seat time, making up some of the seat time that's being missed?
Yeah, obviously, several of our programs are difficult to execute in a virtual environment. I just wanted to mention some of the things that I've seen. I know we have a lot of employer partners and instructors who are doing demonstrations, and then students at home will perform work and share video with the instructor. Obviously, there are some challenges in that not every student has internet access, not every student has technology. So we're working very hard to address those issues. But there are lots of examples of teachers, for example, in agriculture, who have gone to student homes, dropped off materials, and then the students would engage in work, say, analyzing soil properties and things like that over time. Then they could provide records or actually produce materials that would then be returned to the school. So things like that have happened. Obviously, in the welding example that was introduced, that's very difficult in that people aren't going to have the materials at home to be able to do that. So in a lot of those cases, we're essentially delaying, where students are working through various modules as they can, virtual, and when we wherein we might be able to get back into the school environment, or if not the school environment, potentially an employer partner or a post-secondary partner's facility to be able to do the skill proficiency demonstrations.
And Patrick, do you happen to, I've seen a couple of questions about safety glasses fogging up, and some folks have shared out solutions. Is that something that you've had issues with so far as masks and the fogging piece and the safety problems that could happen because of that?
So we've not had to deal with that on a large scale yet because we've been out of the building since March 13th. But my solutions are the same that you would find online. I think there are some like some vinegar-based solutions that you can put on the glasses to reduce fog. So we're exploring absolutely everything we can to find workable solutions. We want to effectively serve as many students as we possibly can. And again, we feel that they're best served from a academic perspective as well as a social perspective if we can get them back in the building as early as possible and get them engaging with their cohort of peers.
Thank you. And we know that something that everyone is experiencing is this loss of class time, and there's always that issue of the summer slide every year. But now in addition to that, we've had students out of school and missing time, and that's been magnified. How are you addressing the class time that's being missed? And I'll go ahead and start with you, Patrick, on this one.
We've continued virtual learning since March, and in fact, we'll go through this week and next week with students engaged online. Obviously, we've had some challenges. I know there have been lots of questions in the chat room about equity, about students with IEPs. So we have individuals who have been assigned as additional supports to reach out and communicate through whatever channels available to make sure that students have stayed engaged to this point. But there's no doubt there's been learning loss. We can't ask students in every class to spend hours a day online. So we know that we're going to have to do some catch up, and that's why we're hoping to be able to reconnect as quickly as possible. And if I may, just for a second, I know there have been several questions to go by about how we're handling practicum experiences and things like that. We have several employer partners and contracted partners who are more than willing to accept our students today. But again, our governor has closed down the state through the end of June. So unfortunately, we're on hold in a lot of areas. I will say, though, in areas like cosmetology, as that was a specific question, our contracted partner has provided access to some online materials that have allowed students to go ahead and earn hours through a virtual environment. They've also asked for certain skills to be demonstrated on video and returned to the instructor. So most of our students are able to continue making progress, not only toward certification, but toward their dual credits. But there are some areas where I'm thinking of aviation maintenance, for example, where we've just had to say programs are on hold. When they reopen, we're going to get students back in at no cost to the students. Their tuition has been paid for the spring semester, so we're giving them an incomplete, and we'll just allow them to continue as soon as we can.
And
Dwight, a quick comment there, Rachael, about the learning loss piece. Was doing some research on this actually earlier today. There's this tension between remediation and acceleration. So when planning instruction for the upcoming year, some may be thinking about focusing on the remediation. It's kind of to go back to wherever students left off before quarantine and teaching them from that point forward, rather than starting the new school year where you might normally start, which seems logical. But there's actually some lessons learned from a report of what happened after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, where, according to that report, schools that focus mostly on skill recovery rather than teaching grade level content found that students were less engaged and scored poorly on tests, whereas schools got better results when they took a spiraling approach. So where the regular content is taught on a normal schedule and the gaps in student knowledge are filled in and scaffolded as needed. So something interesting I was just looking at today.
Do you happen to have a link to that?
Yes.
Okay, because I want to look into that more. That's a really interesting concept. I hadn't thought about that side of it. All right, and Dwight, what's happening in Oklahoma? How are you compensating for the seat time missed, or certifications, or really thinking through addressing the summer slide?
Yeah, we've offered our students to come back early. Those that, because we felt like we had about a 2-month gap that we missed, and similar to what we were just talking about earlier, to start where we left off and pick that back up and try to get them back up to speed before we hit the fall. And I saw a question. I think all the experts are over here on the chat. I think I've been watching these questions, and I think most of the questions are getting answered over here. So if you're not watching that, I suggest you do. But one was about sanitation, and I might touch on that. And I was trying to get the brand, and if I do, I'll put it in there. But we have a gun and a machine that we go in and sanitize restrooms. I mean, we're ramping up our cleaning staff, our classrooms, our shop areas. And so we're looking to really ramp up our sanitation as we have students in. So that was one of the questions I saw pop up, and is if I can get the brand of that gun, I'll share, because it's just like a handheld kind of a pistol grip deal that you go in and you can sanitize with. That's working really well. We've even looked at maybe third party in some of that. So I guess it's a Victor or Victory, I guess, brand. I'll get more information, try to get it on the chat before we finish. But to the earlier question, Rachel, is we're looking to bring those students back a little early, have opportunity. We actually have offered too, if they want to stay, even though we feel like 2 months, we've offered them the rest of the semester, and we're going to probably expand. We're open from 7 in the morning till about 10:30 at night. So we may have even where students can come in the evening and we're looking at some creative times where they can come in and catch up, so we don't feel like we cheated them in the spring.
That's a great idea. And are your instructors responding well to that? Because I'm sure that affects their schedules.
Yeah, we already have, because of the way we're set up, and Brady's similar. We've got kind of a day staff and an evening staff. And so we would just break that up. It might be a different instructor, but similar, same trade. So we might have a day construction teacher and an evening instructor in construction. So we can break them up a little. And that's what we're also, I think Jerry mentioned, keeping the numbers down and changing the schedule. We're looking at that too, offering adults evening sessions to come in for if they want to do that.
And I'm seeing some excellent resources being shared in the chat, as you mentioned, Dwight. And there are a lot of people with great thoughts on this. And I just want to mention that in June, we're going to be having a webinar that is based off of Sunil Bhakta. We did a podcast last week, and he mentioned like a coffee time where people come in and just share out resources and questions. So we're going to use that concept and just have folks come in without having without having formal panelists. Anyone can jump in, chime in, and share out. So stay tuned for that. You'll see an email blast about that later on this week. And Dr. Brockway, what's happening in Ohio? How are you guys compensating for class time and certification pieces?
Well, we're doing a similar as everyone else as far as offering certifications and credentials after school year. And our instructors are going to be doing that. We're going to be paying them a flat fee per hour for that, because it's after their contract time. We're having a great response with that as far as those students that still need certifications, ASE, AW, American Society of Welding, and so on and forth, and as far as that's concerned. So we're doing similar to everyone else. I see the question as far as PD for teachers. We're going to have PD for teachers in August as far as what we're going to be doing for the fall. We're putting a task force, a group of teachers together first 2 weeks in June, a cross-section of CTE teachers, academic teachers, and support staff to look at what the current guidelines are. In Ohio, they change every time there's a governor's press conference, almost as bad as, I won't say it, our president, we won't go there. But so the guidelines changed quite a bit, but so we're going to look at what we're going to do for next year. We put together right now a draft of a three-page startup plan dealing with the institutional operations, program and classroom operations, classroom access, student breaks, community outreach. We feel it's very important for the parents and the community to understand we're going to be the safest school in the county, or safest school in the area, so that their parents are not afraid to send their kids to our campus, or their children to our campus. So we're going to really promote heavily how much we're going to sanitize and PPE, and also the hands-on training they're going to get.
And thank you. And while I have you on, there was another question that came up. Let me see if I can find it now. Let's see. Are you convening a task force to plan for return, and who is on it? Is it something that all stakeholders are involved, or how are you approaching your task force or your plan?
We're putting it together, like I said, a cross section. The administration is looking at the teachers, so we're going to put CTE teachers on it, academic teachers, support staff, counselors, our intervention specialists. So we're going to have a cross section of the district team, put the team together, and then look at what would be the best, like you want to say, best practices for our district, so we get complete buy-in of the whole a whole district family.
Okay, and Brady, how will the current pandemic alter CTE or education in general beyond just the near future?
I think a lot of the things that we are turning to now in a virtual format are going to be here to stay. I think it's not only in our full-time programs, but what we might do in a customized format for business and industry. We have, in looking into the future, we're looking at different ways for curriculum development, not only the development that we might do inside Autry itself, but the way we would even work with outside people in development of curriculum. Rachael, in the past, if we had a company that needed a specific technical program developed, then we would be going into a plant, recording how they operate equipment, what types of equipment they use, safety practices, bringing that back, putting it into a stand up in front of the class format and making that delivery. In the future, we'll make sure that all of that is recorded, where we can put it in a digital format where it'll be available. We also contracted with adjunct faculty to develop curriculum currently and in the past. What I see in the future is Autry Technology Center and other schools will actually be reviewing curriculum from different instructors and hosting that on our servers with a royalty paid back to those people that have developed the curriculum. We've got adjunct faculty that have worked inside plants. In fact, they might have retired from many of those companies that we work with. They know how that place operates. So we will be working with them. In fact, we're developing contracts to allow us to do that now, where they develop curriculum, we review it. It in turn is hosted on our website. So our own clientele, as well as new customers, wherever they might be, would be going to an Autry website to find curriculum that fits their individual needs. In the past, we've always looked outside for that type of thing to bring in. I think we will use that to drive people to our own website to open up additional training opportunities for the school itself. Another thing, and I want to touch just a second on the last question you had about the loss of instruction time. We provided virtual instruction. We have people back now trying to pick up on those hands-on skills, and we'll use some of the time at the beginning of the next contract year for our instructors to deliver that. We'll slot students in the fall, but one thing that we will do is we will guarantee our students to our employers. So if our employers hire one of our students and there is this particular skill set that they think they need more instruction on, they can bring those students or send those students back to us at any point in time. Or if it's a new set of skills that they have for the workers in their particular facility, and they have one of our graduates already on staff, they won't pay for that particular graduate to receive the skills that they need to be successful in that company. Those companies serve on our advisory council. They're telling us what we should be teaching. This is one way that we ensure that we can do that. So teaching those skill sets even after the student has left our campus is a priority that we have. So we're going to honor that with our companies with that guarantee.
And thank you. That's really, really helpful. And I'm sure, well, first of all, I want to have you on the podcast soon to talk more about what Autry is doing, because having been able to see at your campus and the phenomenal innovative work that's happening, I think that's beneficial. Next, let's have Will. Can you share a little bit on your thoughts on what the future of CTE and education will look like in the near future and moving forward?
Ooh, that's a big question. What I can say is that, no matter what, I think most folks are going to have a blended learning scenario ready, in their back pocket, in their quiver when it comes to the fall, whether you have blended in person and we have to go to some measure of social distancing again. And so I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like, but I think folks would be remiss not to highly train our educators in how to still be as effective as possible in those virtual settings. And so looking beyond just access to devices and really equipping them with the strategies and mindsets it takes to be impactful in the online setting, even with the constraints of not having some of the tools and physical things that are needed. So that's my 2 cents on it from our perspective.
No, and I think that's a really good point. It's not going to return to operations as they were prior to this. It will be something to where we all have to be prepared for what could potentially happen in the future. And I know we're getting close to our hour, so I want to make sure I give Alisha a chance to share out policy updates. Alisha, thank you so much for being with us. Can you share with us what's happening in the realm of career and technical education when it comes to policy updates?
Sure, thanks, Rachael. So right now we're in a bit of a calm period in between legislation in DC. They're working very hard at the Department of Education to get the CARES Act dollars out to states and school districts and post-secondary institutions. As I mentioned earlier, if you don't know exactly where those dollars are or how they're being spent, I would definitely encourage you to loop up with decision makers at your institution or in your school district to ask questions. We've heard in some cases about the funds not really making it to CTE programs, particularly at the K-12 level. If the money flows to your school district, it might be eaten up by food services or other emergency spending, which is certainly valuable, but we want to make sure that school districts are thinking about all of the programs and services that students need. So as those dollars are flowing out, Congress is looking at what the next package of relief might look like. I think it's almost certain that we'll see some type of state stabilization fund built around education, similar to what was in CARES, with a slush fund of sorts of dollars that go out specifically to institutions and school districts to help make up for what we know will be very severe state budget cuts in most places, some of which have already come, others which are down the road. So that's one of the likely things. How much it will be and exactly the timing is the uncertain part. There was a $90 billion amount attached to that provision of the House Democrats bill that passed about a week ago, but the Senate has yet to act on the next package and says they want to wait a couple of weeks to see how things are going. So best guess for timing would be probably end of June before we saw another piece of legislation finalized, unless something changes drastically in the situation around the country in the next couple of weeks, which things have been changing drastically repeatedly, so that certainly could happen. The one thing that we're really advocating for is specific resources for CTE programs that would flow through Perkins, which would help to counter some of what we're hearing about the dollars not making it specifically to CTE programs. So that's what we're advocating for, and you've probably seen all of our materials. But regardless of the funding stream for the dollars, we just want to make sure you get as much relief as possible, because we know that all of the things that you were talking about for the last hour take resources. It takes resources to buy protective equipment. It takes resources to staff taking students' temperatures and to bring students back in for makeup time if you had to close their programs. All of those things we know take additional resources. So we're working hard on that. And we would love to hear from you about what your specific needs are so that we can then share those up with policymakers and see what we might be able to do to help with those.
And thank you so much, Alisha. And Alisha did share her email address in the chat, so please reach out to her with any questions.
Thank you so much.
And I know that we're getting close to the end of our time, and we didn't even get through half of the questions that were in the chat or in the side panel, but we will address those on a future webinar, because those are things that are just everyone shares in common. But what I would like to do is close with a rapid fire, letting each of our panelists share out a recommendation or a closing thought that they have for leaders. And let's go ahead and start with you, Dwight, for this, and then each of the panelists just go ahead and chime in after he finishes.
I would say this is such a fluid situation, and that's one of the things that I've tried to stress to staff as we move forward. Today we talked about things we might do, and tomorrow they may be completely different. So I think we've got to stay flexible and adjust to the situation. So that would be what we've tried to do with staff, is just stay alert and see how this thing goes. I think we have to try some things that may not work, and we have to adjust. But that would be my shout out at the end, is just stay flexible and stay positive and stay healthy. Thanks everybody for being on. It's your turn, Brady.
I thought you were going to say that. I told staff the other day that if I'm going to err, I'm going to err on the side of safety. And I'm going to put people in the safest situation in my mind that I can put them in. And if I don't think that it's safe, then at this point in time, we're not going to do it. And that's going to be challenging. Because I know that's not going to be accepted well by all, but it's going to help me sleep at night. So if I had to just say one thing, that's what it is. Use your head, put people in the safest situation that you can possibly provide, and then keep moving forward.
Well,
This is Patrick. I agree.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you. So I agree with everything that Dwight and Brady had said. Certainly, we need to keep exploring options that will make sure that we are safe and taking the smartest steps forward to protect our students. Toward that end, I want to mention that the ACTE Communications Department just sent an email out to membership. It includes a short 10-minute survey where you can shed light on what each of you are doing locally to prepare for next year. So if you wouldn't mind participating in that, that would be great. And also for those of you interested in virtual models of work-based learning, I know that Kelly Deemer has shared a link in the chat room for a webinar tomorrow sharing models that are working across the country. So I know I plan to attend that one. Hope you guys can join that as well. Best wishes.
I can only echo what my two senior individuals who are wiser and greater than I have said as far as flexibility and safety. I would say also make sure that the staff has a buy-in into it, that you involve the staff and your staff into the decisions and the modeling that's going to be put forth for the upcoming year. The staff is as far as I'm concerned, my strength. They're very student-oriented, and they will come up with great ideas on how to meet the challenges that CareerTech has met over the last 50-some years. We've always risen to the challenge, and I'm sure we'll rise to the challenge also with all the great leadership we have.
Yeah, my 30 seconds is just, the status quo is upended. This is actually a great opportunity to do new and innovative things moving forward. This has created some space for us to try some cool things. So I think that's an interesting way to think about it. And also here to help at EdConnective, just put a link in the chat. We're having a panel tomorrow. Some of our coaches who are working directly with teachers. It's more educator focused. So like if you're a teacher or something like that in your network, you can direct them towards that about tips and tricks on the distance learning best practices. So yeah, definitely would direct folks to that. And, we'll be helpful in any way we can over here at EdConnective.
Thank you. And I think that, let's see, Alisha, do you have any closing thoughts you would like to share?
Nope, I'm good. I think the other panelists summed it up greatly. Just please do reach out to us at ACT if you have questions or concerns, or there's anything we can do to be helpful.
Thank you so much. And there is a question in the chat for the link for the work-based learning online session. So I know Kelly is on the call, or Patrick, if one of you can share that in the chat. And thanks so much to our panelists for sharing your expertise and so many great best practices for moving forward. And for those of you who had asked about sharing this recording with others, yes, please do. This will be in our NCLA our YouTube channel. So please feel free to share that link with others who were not able to join us today. Our next webinar will take place on June 9th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And that's going to be on the future of work and the future of education. We have an awesome lineup of panelists for that as well. Thank you. Be safe, and please continue to share all those best practices, and we'll make sure that we address the questions that we did not get to in the chat in a future webinar. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.